Welcome back, everybody. Hope everyone is doing well. My name is Jason. I'll be your host on this CFL talk show, Hussey's Huddle. In this video, we recap Week 11 of the 2022 CFL season. But really quickly before we get started, if you want to support the channel, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And with that said, let's get started. So in general, a pretty good week of football, but the big asterisk with that is the injury front. We've seen several key players go down to injury in the past couple of weeks here, especially this week. So that's unfortunate, and hopefully we see an improvement in that regard as we go forward with the season. But with that said, let's get started with our first game, which is Edmonton and Ottawa on Friday Night Football, with the Edmonton Elks coming out in the second half and just absolutely destroying the Ottawa Redblacks 30-12. And starting from the Redblacks' point of view, you just have to say, where do they go from here? Because last year, I think a lot of people saw it as a coaching or, a talent problem for this team because they just quite simply just didn't have the horses, and I thought that same thing going into the season. But I think this offseason, they make all the changes, same coaching staff, kept the continuity in that regard, and it's the same damn results. And it's just so embarrassing how bad this offense has been the last 3 years. I just don't know how you fix it. And honestly, I don't know if they have the most talented roster in the world. Maybe some of us, including myself, overrated the Redblacks roster going into this season, but at the same time, they do have a lot of noteworthy players there that just are underperforming right now, and they just have not been able to click on a regular basis on offense, and it just doesn't seem like it's improved that much over last year. Obviously, the Jeremiah Masoli injury, but even when factoring that in, Caleb Evans is now unstart like 15-16. He's got some starts under his belt. He should be improving, but he has just really struggled as a passer as of late, and I just don't know where the Redblacks go from here. What do they do in terms of improving this roster going forward? Do they fire Paul Appelese, the head coach? It's going to be interesting to see what they do going forward, but like I said, don't know what they're going to do. And then from the Edmonton perspective, I think the big takeaway for me in this game is that for Chris Jones, the first couple of weeks of the season, it looked like a mess, especially on the defensive side of the ball. But these last handful of weeks here, we're starting to see a couple of core players emerge on this defense that are starting to really fit in well with this Chris Jones defense. Guy like Enoch McConzo, who was their first round this past season in the draft, he has looked really good at that strong side linebacker position, kind of being a Swiss Army knife type guy. He's had a couple of his better weeks the past couple of weeks here. And then you got a guy like Matthew Thomas at defensive end, a new starter to the team, has played relatively well. I think he's starting to emerge as he gets more accustomed to the Canadian Football League. You got Niles Morgan back from injury, who missed the first part of the season at linebacker. And Nafis Lyon has been a guy that is starting to play a little bit better on the cornerback position for this team. So I think you're starting to see Chris Jones put his stamp on this defense, and you're starting to see this team improve as a result. And I think the other thing you take away from this game is that they were a completely different team in the second half on offense. Whatever it was, they just flipped a switch. Taylor Cornelius looked like a completely different guy. They used the running game very effectively, but I think the passing game just saw a notable improvement. Kenny Lawler, once again, what more can you really say about him? He has been outstanding this season, but I think the other players like Darrell Walker, who's had a couple of really good weeks the past couple of weeks after being really dreadful for the last season and a half here, finally got into the end zone, first time since 2019, if you can believe that. So good to see that from him and the Edmonton Elks as they look to improve on what was a slow start to the season and improve here in the second half of the season. Now moving on to the second game of the week, which was between the BC Lions and the Saskatchewan Roughriders, with the BC Lions coming out on top in this one, 28-10. And obviously the big story in this one was one I already covered on the channel, Nathan Rourke's injury. Such a devastating injury for this team right now, especially with how they've started the season. So if you guys wanted to talk more about that or hear me talk more about that, I will leave a link in the description to that video that I did on the weekend. But other than that, I think the big takeaway I had in this game from an offensive perspective for BC was that Lucky Whitehead really emerged, and he has been very quietly having a pretty good season this year, despite not being the most targeted guy in that receiving core. He hasn't scored the most touchdowns. Obviously, guys like Dominic Ryans and Brian Burnham have been very key for this team, but Lucky Whitehead's quietly been around a top 5, top 6 receiving yards in the league this year, and he had a big game in this one. And so if they can get him going again and all these other pieces, maybe they can, kind of fend off the loss of Rourke a little bit here, and the supporting cast will just have to carry them going forward if they want to remain in contention, and until Rourke gets back at least. And it's going to be very interesting to see if they can do that in the meantime while he's injured. And then on the losing side of things, you have the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who made a controversial quarterback change in this one at halftime, pulling Cody Fajardo for Mason Fine, who has thrown, I believe it was 13 CFL passes before this game. And he came in the first drive, led them to a touchdown. And then other than that, he just really didn't do too much other than that in the second half. So I don't know what they're going to do going forward. I think the rumor is that Cody Fajardo is going to be back as the starting quarterback this week once they take on BC again. So it will be interesting to see how they perform in this one. But clearly the leash is short and the patience is running out for Cody Fajardo in Saskatchewan. And I don't think it's all on him. I think this offensive line has been a mess all year. It's starting to look like the worst offensive line in the CFL, especially with those tackle positions just being so poor in pass protection. I don't know what they're going to do going forward. They went with Jamal Campbell at right tackle, who got injured in this game. I don't know what they're going to do at that spot going forward. They released Natai Rogers last week, who was just an albatross for this team this season. So I don't know what they're going to do. I thought Rogers was the main problem, but I think the problems on that unit really run deeper, and it's going to be interesting to see if they can somewhat remedy that going forward, because they're going to need to if they want to get back into it with this West Division and the playoff race this season. That being said, the Rough Riders do catch a huge break with the Nathan Rourke injury, as he will be out next week when they play them again. So if they can take advantage and win that game, it could be huge for their confidence going forward. Now moving on to a very exciting Saturday doubleheader from this weekend, starting with the first game between the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Montreal Alouettes, with the Montreal Alouettes coming away with a 29-28 last-second victory here. And boy, are these two teams evenly matched. Both of these games that they played this season have come down right to the wire, so I'm very excited for round 3 later this season. And talking about this game from the Tiger Cats' point of view, first of all, I think you got to start questioning Orlando Steinauer, the head coach for the Hamilton Tiger Cats now, because I think he's starting to look like he doesn't know what he's doing a lot of the time when he's game managing, making these decisions in game. I think there was a situation in the first drive of the game. They have a chance to take the lead. It was 0-0. It was, I believe it was 3rd and goal from the 6, and they decided to go for it and not take the lead. I think I'm for being aggressive in a lot of those situations, but at the same time, I think when it's an opportunity to take the lead, to give your offense or your defense the lead, I think you take it, especially if you're Hamilton, being a very offensively challenged team. Later in the game, they actually had a 3rd and 1, and they didn't go for it, and that was even more confusing. So just very questionable in-game management from Orlando Steinauer, and clearly this team is just not making the second half adjustments necessary from a coaching perspective, because this problem of blowing leads late in games have just been a persistent issue throughout the season. So don't know what the Tiger Cats are going to do going forward, and I'm starting to lose faith a little bit in Orlando Steinauer. Not saying fire him yet. I think you give him the season at least to ride out here, but it's going to be very interesting to see what happens in Hamilton over the next couple of weeks if they continue to struggle. My next thing here for this game is that I felt the referees were just terrible on both sides. I think both teams really got screwed by the refs. I think Hamilton really had no business taking the lead, because there was a situation where they called a horse collar on the Alouettes that gave the Tiger Cats a free first down when the game would have been over otherwise on a 3rd down sack of Matthew Schultz. So honestly, don't know what the refs are doing. A lot of just nicky-nacky special teams penalties, which I just kind of hate, especially when they make a big return or something like that. Something huge happens on special teams and just saying, oh, look, there's a flag. It's just very disappointing to see, just seeing how involved the refs were in this game and how it affected the outcome. I just don't know what to think of the refs. I think Al Bradbury's crew did this game. He's been famous for doing calling a lot of penalties this season, and it should be interesting to see if going forward the reffing situation in the CFL improves, because it's really been pretty dreadful so far the last couple of weeks, in my opinion. Now, the third point here before we move on to Montreal, I just wanted to say that I think Matthew Schultz played pretty well in this game when he was targeting Tim White, because it was just night and day. When they were targeting Tim White, it seemed like the offense was being very productive, but there really wasn't too much going on the Tiger Cats offense besides that. And Tim White had an excellent game, but I don't know if you can win that way with just targeting one receiver so heavily in the CFL. It's just not really a sustainable strategy, even though Tim White obviously has been an outstanding player the last couple of weeks for the Tiger Cats. But they need to get Steven Dunbar more involved. They're starting the 3 Canadian receivers right now. I just don't know if there's a ton of upside with that group. Lamar Durant has been a pretty big disappointment in the few games that he's been back, so hopefully he can turn that around. But I think Keandre Smith has been pretty good as a Canadian rookie there, but at the same time, just not a ton of upside with this team so far this season, and I just don't know what they're going to do going forward at that receiver position, because I think they need to spread the ball around more. And then from the Montreal perspective, I think you got to say that the stars are starting to align a little bit for this team right now. They get the big win against Winnipeg last week, which is obviously just wholly unexpected, but then they were able to sneak out a win here to get the record to 4-6, pull ahead of the Tiger Cats, because if they had lost that game, that would have been super detrimental to their season going forward. They would have lost the season series already to Hamilton. Now that they've won that game, they have an opportunity to win that season series when they play them the third time, and then now they're 4-6. They are now even in the win column with the Toronto Argonauts, one ahead of the Tiger Cats. Toronto has to go and play Hamilton the next 2 weeks, while Montreal is on a bye this week and then has Ottawa after the bye. And that's another thing with Montreal. Montreal has Ottawa 3 more times. And looking at how Ottawa's played this season, those might be 3 wins that you're looking at for the Alouettes, because the Alouettes have usually played in recent years pretty well against the Redblacks. So the Stars may have started to align a little bit for the Montreal Alouettes to climb to the top of the East here. And honestly, I think they really earned it in this game. They executed late in games, made the plays that the Tiger Cats didn't. Reggie White had that big 45-yard touchdown late in the game to pull ahead, and then obviously they executed and got it into field goal range to kick the game winner. And on that note, I wanted to say that, is it too early to say that Trevor Harris is having a little bit of a bounce-back season here? I mean, not even comparison to what he was back in like 2018 with the Redblacks, but is he a guy that is bounced back from a horrible season that he has last year? I think so. I think he is actually having a pretty good season this year, and he actually got the touchdowns in this game through 3 touchdowns, just the 1 interception, and I think that is a good step for Trevor Harris going forward. He has relatively played pretty consistently since he's been the quarterback for the Alouettes so far this season, and he has averaged, I believe he's 3rd in the league in yards per attempt, which I always look at as a very key stat for quarterbacks. And so I think he's doing a good job of keeping this offense on track, and he's had a couple of really good games here. The game a couple weeks ago against Ottawa, and then I think this was his best game to date as a Montreal Alouette. So a little bit of a bounce-back season here for Trevor Harris, not compared to his previous standard, but again, compared to where he was last season. And then moving on to our last game of the week between the Calgary Stampeders and the Toronto Argonauts, with the Calgary Stampeders just barely squeaking out a 22-19 victory here. And talking from the Toronto Argonauts' point of view, first of all, they have lost basically their margin of error, I would say, in this East Division playoff race here, because a couple of weeks ago, they really had a chance to stranglehold this entire division. They had a couple of games in hand on everybody because they had the 2 bye weeks earlier in the season. But now that they've lost the last couple of weeks to an injured Hamilton team and then a very winnable game here against Calgary, they're now 4-5, and now Montreal and Hamilton have a chance to catch them here in the next couple of weeks here. So it'll be very interesting to see if Toronto continues to fall apart after losing those last couple of weeks. And I think the main cause of it is really that offensive line up front that is starting to become a major issue for this team. They've had injuries there the entire season. A guy like Peter Nicastro was such a huge loss for them, who was probably their best offensive lineman last year as a rookie. He was really an impact guy for them last year. You got guys that are playing out of position like Phil Blake, who's usually left guard. He's playing left tackle for this team right now. You got an injury to Isaiah Cage, who's one of their better tackles when healthy. So it's been a mess, especially the past couple of weeks for the Argos, and that's something that they'll need to figure out, because if this continues like this, McLeod Bethel-Thompson likely going to suffer an injury, because he is being beat up quite a bit in games right now. So it'll be interesting to see how they decide to reshuffle that unit going forward, if they decide to replace Blake at left tackle and stop playing him out of position, or they decide to move around Dijon Allen, who's at a right tackle position. Do they move him back over to the left side where he played last year? Then who do they put at the right side? Don't know. Not an easy solution either way to the Argos' problems right now. So it'll be interesting to see how they do and how they solve that going forward. And I think it's going to be very crucial to their fate the rest of the season. And then obviously the big story coming out of this game from the Calgary Stampeders' point of view was the benching of quarterback Bo Levi Mitchell. And he has really struggled the past couple of weeks here. And I think he got off to a pretty good start this season. I thought there were a lot of good signs there. The win against Hamilton, the win against Edmonton, a couple of wins against Edmonton he looked pretty good in. But the last several weeks here, he has really stalled this offense. The passing game has just been super inefficient, very low 50s completion percentage, just not creating the big plays even when he does complete passes. So I definitely agreed with the decision to put Jake Maier into this game. And honestly, I'm just not so sure that Jake Maier's not a better option right now for the Calgary Stampeders than Bo Levi Mitchell is. And I think that Jake Maier, every time he's gotten the opportunity, yeah, sure, he didn't light the world on fire in this game when he came in. He threw an interception himself. His receiver fell down in the end zone. But I think generally speaking, whenever Jake Maier has been on the field, he's given an opportunity to play, he has outperformed Bo Levi Mitchell the past couple of years here, and should be given the opportunity at least to start this week against Winnipeg. You can always go back to Bo, and I think this might be the most healthy thing for this team right now. Maybe light a fire under Bo, sit him down on the bench for a game, and it'll be interesting to see what they do going forward, because Jake Maier has looked very impressive in the opportunities he has had, including a great first career start last year against Winnipeg at Winnipeg. So it'll be interesting to see if they decide to go that route, start him on Thursday when they play the Bombers for a third time. But not an ideal situation right now for this offense, because a lot of these guys have just been super underperforming. Guys like Kamar Jordan, Reggie Bagleton, the receiving core has just been very underwhelming this year for the Stampeders, arguably the most underperforming receiving core, in my opinion, in the entire league. And I think the quarterback position obviously has been underperforming. Really, the only thing that's keeping them alive in games this year has been that running game that they haven't really been feeding enough. I was looking it up. They are actually first in the league in rushing yards per game, but they only rush the ball the 6th most in the league right now. So that needs to increase going forward, because they've been very effective in running the ball, and they need to really ride these great running backs that they have. Hopefully they get Kadeem Carey back soon, but Dedrick Mills has looked really good filling in there, and Peyton Logan has looked really good in a lot of opportunities that he's had as a returner, but also in the backfield as well. So I think they need to ride the things that are going well for this offense right now, because they are really struggling in a lot of respects in the passing game so far this season. And then the last thing here for the Stampeders is I think they do still have the opportunity to climb the standings and get past BC now. A couple of games back still, but at the same time, you have the Nathan Rourke injury. You got to factor in that they're probably going to lose a game or two at least that Nathan Rourke otherwise would have won for that team. And it'll be interesting to see if Calgary can take advantage of it, win enough games here down the stretch to get a home playoff game, because I think this is a talented, but it is a flawed team right now here in Calgary, because they just have not been able to click on all aspects of their team so far this season. They have plenty of talent on this roster, but they just need to click and execute at a higher degree than they have so far this season to beat the better teams in this league, including Winnipeg. But with that said, that is going to be the end of today's recap, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to thank each and every one of you for watching. Once again, my name is Jason. If you want to support the channel, as always, be sure to hit like and subscribe. And with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comment section. And with that said, I'll see you guys next time. Peace.